Hello everyone, thank you for waiting to hear my presentation. I'm Kelly Spryfair, Senior Engagement Manager at the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and thanks to be here at the Transformation Cornwall event. It's been a few years, I don't think I've done one of these since pre-COVID actually, so nice to be re-engaging in Cornwall, particularly with the historic churches sector. It was obviously the promise of a Barnacot's pasty that lured me over the Tamar from my shire neighbouring you. As I said, I'm Kelly Spryfair, Senior Engagement Manager. We're now part of a broader area team for the London and the South. I used to work when it was the South West, but we merged into that. So we do cover the whole region with our funding. But we have a particular interest today in talking about the historic churches and other types of heritage that we support. There we go. So following on, we're from the community funds this morning. We're another part of the lottery family. The community fund ourselves and some of the others, the Sports England and Arts, we generate our income from national lottery player income. So that's what we'll see with the types of projects we fund, whilst fundamentally about the heritage, there will be always ways in which we want to see how people are involved in the delivery of those projects. We are the UK's largest funder of heritage, and we have literally just launched our new strategy, the first time of a 10-year strategy called Heritage 2033. And the vision is very clear. It's for heritage to be valued, cared for, and sustained by everyone now and in the future. There's substantial funding to be invested, and I'll go into some detail through the presentation today about the range of heritage that we can support and the range of grants that support our grant making. Like most funders here today, primarily we're for not-for-profit organisations. That includes charities, CICs, CIOs. Again, like Jenny said this morning, a lot of that is defined by having that constitution. So it's not necessarily just charities, it can be unincorporated organisations and associations. But importantly, and when we're discussing around churches, PCCs are totally valid as a applicant organisation to apply, along with other types of local authorities from town, district to county, because often these types of organisations have the responsibilities and care for a whole range of historic assets. In some circumstances, we can fund private owners of heritage assets. Unfortunately, that's not just to fix your roof of your house. That would still be about maintaining and widening public benefit and public access, for example, to a historic building, for example. And again, we're back to this point. We connect people and communities to the UK's heritage. The National Lottery Heritage Fund, over its history, has invested a lot in terms of historic places of worship. At last count, it was £970 million across the whole UK. We're a UK-based funder. What we found post-COVID and with our last strategy, which ended towards the end of last financial year, we probably saw a drop-off really from some of the more traditional heritage sectors like places of worship, probably due to some of the drivers of some of our outcomes. What we have revisited with this new strategy, as I said, just launched only in January, is a real starting point for the needs of heritage. So, as I said, that's why we're looking to re-engage and discuss today how we can bring back into the fold, more historic places of worship. On this slide is a little bit about our strategy. Lots of details of this online. The key thing will be the investment principles that guide our funding, which I'll go into in a second. But it's a pause again, really, for heritage. I've been doing this role and this job for long enough. I can be probably defined as heritage and get my own grant. But heritage is a very broad subject. Whilst, as I said, we're talking today a lot about historic buildings, historic places of worship, we take the whole breadth of heritage to be defined by the project that you submit and the information included. One key aspect of our funding and what we also defined as heritage is landscapes, nature, biodiversity. It's the part of heritage that people don't ordinarily think of us when considering heritage, which is often the built environment and buildings. It's been lovely to be in this church today to remind myself, getting out of an office and from behind the screen of Teams, the history and heritage that's contained within a historic place of worship. Not only is it the building itself, it's that it's rich in its fixtures, fittings, monuments, flags, organs, bells, stories and people, monuments, graveyards. All of those things would fall into that definition of heritage. And what is also important to consider, we've talked a lot about the built heritage, physical, tangible heritage. We are also a funder for intangible heritage, local heritage, historical events, stories, memories, anniversaries. And it's always great to come to Cornwall, that's particularly rich. Projects that could be looking at Cornish distinctiveness, place, identity. And that can all be contained within one project. One of the conversations I had over lunch brought me back to a case study I used to use, talking to Martin about Oak Apple Day, and that's stories and traditions that happen within places of worship and place, and we consider projects around that as well. So for a starting point of any project that may be considered by us, it's that starting with that focus on heritage, whether, as I said, it's built, nature, memory or story. What is that heritage? Why is there a need for that project? Is that heritage at risk in some way? And is the project a suitable response? This slide is it's not too bad to see when you're looking at the big screen there. As I said, we've moved in this strategy to our funding to be and projects to express their projects in terms of the need for that heritage and under our investment principles. Some case studies I've got a few slides on should bring this to light. There's 4 of them. Saving the heritage, and that's things like improving condition of heritage, reducing heritage at risk. Protecting the environment, putting landscapes and nature into recovery, but also reducing negative environmental impacts of projects. Organisational sustainability is around resilience, capacity and skills of organisations to both deliver and develop and sustain that heritage longer term. And of course, inclusion, access and participation are all about aims within projects to either increase audiences, to reduce barriers, and to get more people involved in activities and the heritage of that project. Now this diagram is very nice. It's a nice, neat pie split into 4 quarters. All projects need to deliver and express against all 4 of those investment principles, but the strength and focus is up to you, your organisation, and the needs of your project. So a project could primarily be focused, say, this is where I always go wrong because I'm really terrible at maths, around 80% on one of those in terms of saving heritage. And then, somehow it's too late in the afternoon, I've probably got that wrong. How you then do the other proportions against the other areas of the project. And the things that fall under those investment principles should be well-rounded, can express a lot in terms of what the needs of the heritage is, whether it's conserving, whether it's engaging, whether it's bringing back nature recovery or sustaining that heritage. Much better to look at it in practice rather than theory. The case study I've got here, because we've only launched the strategy in January, it was only as of last week we've had our first decision making under the new strategy. The first thing to say on that, whilst I can't talk about the project because it is very, very early days in terms of that. The first project that we considered, the first project we awarded, was a £10,000 grant here in Cornwall for a historic place of worship, and that was in relation to conservation of the historic windows to make that place a better place to be, a better place of worship to engage more people. So what we've done is we've looked at some case studies from our previous strategy that express very well how they could be undertaken under our investment principles. So this was a broad project that undertook historic fabric repairs to the woodwork and the structural repairs to the roof of this Grade 2 listed church. Wider activities included to help with organisational sustainability, training in governance, and training for apprenticeships. It was great to hear one of the other funders earlier talking about heritage skills. We can certainly draw that into projects because there's a great need and a gap there. In terms of engaging more people in inclusion, access and participation, music workshops, arts and craft activity days, partnerships with local museums to bring people in to look at the rich heritage of that church. And protecting the environment, there was energy efficiency through the roof repairs, which not only is a financial efficiency, is also that environmental efficiency. Wanted to put in and that was a grant of just over £200,000. A small one because, as I said, I did want to illustrate as well today, whilst we're primarily, from my perspective, talking around the historic buildings, to remind people around land and nature conservation. So this was working in Wiltshire, looking at a programme of activities about conserving ancient woodland habitats. But again, a broad range of activities to engage people, particularly those with mental health, through a range of activities around pond dipping, monitoring, and then it brought those habitats into better condition. And that was at our lowest end of funding, that is £10,000. We only have 2 grant programmes now at the National Lottery Heritage Fund, effectively middle size and large. We will expect to make most of our grants under our single round open programme. That's the first one. They haven't really got great titles. National Lottery Heritage Grants, £10,000 to £250,000. That's our single round grant programme. And that one has relatively quick decision making. 8 weeks from the submission of a full application that goes through our checks, and we have monthly decision making meetings on those on grants of that level. Through speaking to a few people today, I think sometimes people don't realise that we do offer lower levels of grants, smaller grants starting from £10,000. So, and we're really keen to hear more from those smaller level projects, say the 10 to 100, the 10 to £150,000. We have quite minimal match funding requirements at this level. Some of that can just be volunteer and in-kind, match towards the project. To enable more organisations to be able to apply for smaller grants, we're able to fund 50% of the grant up in advance so the project can get started. There aren't so many issues around things like cash flow in those projects. One thing we can also undertake under our smaller levels of grant, which is worth flagging up, particularly when you're custodians of a historic building, for example, is things that may be exploratory, preparatory planning work, feasibility type activities, business planning, to understand the asset, to understand the business and market around it, and to understand how that might engage local communities and audiences. To do that pre-planning, preparatory work, to understand things in better detail that then may lead on to a larger scale application in the future. And also, we do also encourage, where appropriate, phasing of projects, if that's appropriate to the needs, because sometimes more smaller scale projects are easier to manage and deliver with those shorter time scales. So that's a consideration as well. The next level of grants up is the £250,000 upwards, up to a whopping £10 million. There's far fewer of those around, but we do offer very large grants. These ones are driven by a two-stage process. So it can take a while from the point of putting in an initial inquiry to delivery of a project. That might be up to about 3 years before you're actually practically delivering a project. It is obviously appropriate for some projects, but for smaller projects, we've obviously got our quicker scheme. Like Jenny alluded to with her funding at the Community Fund, this process for our larger grants is also started off with an expression of interest, a shorter form to give a very quick and clear guide as to whether it's something for us and whether a project we'd invite for funding to develop for the next steps of our funding. There's a huge range of resources, and the key one that I want to flag up, and this is in relation to our grants of £10,000 to £250,000, is the one at the top. It's the project inquiry form. This is a short form which enables you to get feedback and guidance from us and the engagement team across the region. And this will tell you whether your project is suitable for us as a funder and whether you should apply to us for that proposal. We will give feedback such as how well the current project proposal expresses the investment principles. Are there any gaps? Are there any other opportunities for that project? And there might be some wider feedback in there in terms of gaps, risks, costs, other things that you may want to consider, partnerships in the area, for example. It's a really good way to get that steer early on, to have that conversation about the suitability of that project and what you might need to do and may need to engage with. We also have a regular monthly webinar, and that is also to help support applicants on top of that project inquiry in developing the project. This is a very mini presentation, just giving you some of the very headline details of what we do. That's much more detailed in that, looking in more detail at case studies, the investment principles, project planning, and going through those processes in much more detail. And we're running those regularly. And as every funder does have, wide range of resources on there, really to look at what we do fund, and the breadth of heritage and the breadth of types of projects that we support are the range of case studies, news stories, blogs, and that really does give that flavour. I'm going to impress again today. This is why I haven't got lots of case studies in there, really at the beginning of a new strategy that is there for 10 years to support the development and needs of the heritage. And I've done many of these strategic plan changes over the years, and I think this one is the most flexible about you telling us the needs of your project in terms of the heritage, and hopefully being able to support projects that you're considering for us. So that's all I want to say today, really. Obviously I do have time for questions. The key thing is get in touch. We'd like to hear from you with some of your ideas and your project proposals. I've spoken to a range of people today. There was clear scope for those to be considered and start developing those out, to hear some early inquiries from you. But we are here to listen and really keen to hear from you. Thank you.